When, about 1850, the phenomenon of table turning was exciting the attention of Europe and ushering in the other phenomena since known as Spiritist, he quickly divined the real nature of those phenomena, as evidence of the existence of an order of relationships hitherto suspected rather than known, viz., those which unite the visible and invisible worlds. Foreseeing the vast importance, to science and to religion, of such an extension of the field of human observation, he entered at once upon a careful investigation of the new phenomena. A friend of his had two daughters who had become what are now called mediums. They were gay, lively, amiable girls, fond of society, dancing, and amusement, and habitually received, when sitting by themselves or with their young companions, communications in harmony with their worldly and somewhat frivolous disposition. But, to the surprise of all concerned, it was found that, whenever he was present, the messages transmitted through these young ladies were of a very grave and serious character, and on his inquiring of the invisible intelligences as to the cause of this change, he was told that spirits of a much higher order than those who habitually communicated through the two young mediums came expressly for him, and would continue to do so, in order to enable him to fulfill an important religious mission. Much astonished at so unlooked for an announcement, he at once proceeded to test its truthfulness by drawing up a series of progressive questions in relation to the various problems of human life and the universe in which we find ourselves, and submitted them to his unseen interlocutors, receiving their answers to the same through the instrumentality of the two young mediums, who willingly consented to devote a couple of evenings every week to this purpose, and who thus obtained, through table rapping and planchette writing, the replies which have become the basis of the Spiritist theory, and which they were as little capable of appreciating as of inventing. When these conversations had been going on for nearly 2 years, he one day remarked to his wife, in reference to the unfolding of these views, which she had followed with intelligent sympathy, "It is a most curious thing. My conversations with the invisible intelligences have completely revolutionized my ideas and convictions. The instructions thus transmitted constitute an entirely new theory of human life, duty, and destiny, that appears to me to be perfectly rational and coherent, admirably lucid and consoling, and intensely interesting. I have a great mind to publish these conversations in a book, for it seems to me that what interests me so deeply might very likely prove interesting to others." His wife warmly approving the idea, he next submitted it to his unseen interlocutors, who replied in the usual way, that it was they who had suggested it to his mind, that their communications had been made to him, not for himself alone, but for the express purpose of being given to the world as he proposed to do, and that the time had now come for putting this plan into execution. "To the book in which you will embody our instructions," continued the communicating intelligences, "you will give, as being our work rather than yours, the title of Le Livre des, the Spirit's Book, and you will publish it, not under your own name, but under the pseudonym of Allan Kardec. 3. Keep your own name of Rivail for your own books already published, but take and keep the name we have now given you for the book you are about to publish by our order, and, in general, for all the work that you will have to do in the fulfillment of the mission which, as we have already told you, has been confided to you by Providence, and which will gradually open before you as you proceed in it under our guidance." The book thus produced and published sold with great rapidity, making converts not in France only, but all over the continent, and rendering the name of Allan Kardec a household word with the readers who knew him only in connection with it, so that he was thenceforth called only by that name, excepting by his old personal friends, with whom both he and his wife always retained their family name. Soon after its publication, he founded the Parisian Society of Psychologic Studies, of which he was president until his death, and which met every Friday evening at his house, for the purpose of obtaining from spirits, through writing mediums, instructions in elucidation of truth and duty. He also founded and edited until he died a monthly magazine, entitled La Revue Spirit, Journal of Psychologic Studies, devoted to the advocacy of the views set forth in the Spirit's Book. Similar associations were speedily formed all over the world. Many of these published periodicals of more or less importance in support of the new doctrine, and all of them transmitted to the Parisian Society the most remarkable of the spirit communications received by them. An enormous mass of spirit teaching, unique both in quantity and in the variety of the sources from which it was obtained, thus found its way into the hands of Allan Kardec, by whom it was studied, collated, coordinated, with unwearied zeal and devotion, during a period of 15 years. From the materials thus furnished to him from every quarter of the globe, he enlarged and completed the Spirit's Book, under the direction of the spirits by whom it was originally dictated. The revised edition of which work, brought out by him in 1857, has become the recognized textbook of the school of spiritualist philosophy so intimately associated with his name. From the same materials he subsequently compiled 4 other works, viz., The Medium's Book, a practical treatise on medianimity and evocations, 1861, The Gospel as Explained by Spirits, an exposition of morality from the Spiritist point of view, 1864, Heaven and Hell, a vindication of the justice of the divine government of the human race, 1865, and Genesis, showing the concordance of the Spiritist theory with the discoveries of modern science and with the general tenor of the Mosaic record as explained by spirits, 1867. He also published 2 short treatises, entitled What is Spiritism? And Spiritism Reduced to its Simplest Expression. It is to be remarked, in connection with the works just enumerated, that Allan Kardec was not a medium, and was consequently obliged to avail himself of the medianimity of others in obtaining the spirit communications from which they were evolved. The theory of life and duty, so immediately connected with his name and labors that it is often erroneously supposed to have been the product of his single mind or of the spirits in immediate connection with him, is therefore far less the expression of a personal or individual opinion than are any other of the spiritualistic theories hitherto propounded, for the basis of religious philosophy laid down in his works was not, in any way, the production of his own intelligence, but was as new to him as to any of his readers, having been progressively adduced by him from the concurrent statements of a legion of spirits, through many thousands of mediums, unknown to each other, belonging to different countries, and to every variety of social position. In person, Allan Kardec was somewhat under middle height. Strongly built, with a large, round, massive head, well-marked features, and clear grey eyes, he looked more like a German than a Frenchman. Energetic and persevering, but of a temperament that was calm, cautious, and unimaginative almost to coldness, incredulous by nature and by education, a close, logical reasoner, and eminently practical in thought and deed, he was equally free from mysticism and from enthusiasm. Devoid of ambition, indifferent to luxury and display, the modest income he had acquired from teaching and from the sale of his educational works sufficed for the simple style of living he had adopted, and allowed him to devote the whole of the profits arising from the sale of his spiritist books and from the review spirit to the propagation of the movement initiated by him. His excellent wife relieved him of all domestic and worldly cares, and thus enabled him to consecrate himself entirely to the work to which he believed himself to have been called, and which he prosecuted with unswerving devotion, to the exclusion of all extraneous occupations, interests, and companionships, from the time when he first entered upon it until he died. He made no visits beyond a small circle of intimate friends, and very rarely absented himself from Paris, passing his winters in the heart of the town, in the rooms where he published his review, and his summers at the Villa Sega, a little semi-rural retreat which he had built and planted, as the home of his old age and that of his wife, in the suburban region behind the Champ de Mars, now crossed in every direction by broad avenues and being rapidly built over, but which at that time was a sort of waste land that might still pass for the country. Grave, slow of speech, unassuming in manner, yet not without a certain quiet dignity resulting from the earnestness and single-mindedness which were the distinguishing traits of his character, neither courting nor avoiding discussion, but never volunteering any remark upon the subject to which he had devoted his life. He received with affability the innumerable visitors from every part of the world who came to converse with him in regard to the views of which he was the recognized exponent, answering questions and objections, explaining difficulties, and giving information to all serious inquirers, with whom he talked with freedom and animation, his face occasionally lighting up with a genial and pleasant smile, though such was his habitual sobriety of demeanor that he was never known to laugh. Among the thousands by whom he was thus visited were many of high rank in the social, literary, artistic, and scientific worlds. The Emperor Napoleon III, the fact of whose interest in spiritist phenomena was no mystery, sent for him several times, and held long conversations with him at the Tuileries upon the doctrines of the Spirit's Book. Having suffered for many years from heart disease, Allan Kardec drew up, in 1869, the plan of a new spiritist organization, that should carry on the work of propagandism after his death. In order to assure its existence, by giving to it a legal and commercial status, he determined to make it a regularly constituted joint stock limited liability publishing and book-selling company, to be constituted for a period of 99 years, with power to buy and sell, to issue stock, to receive donations and bequests, etc. to this society, which was to be called the Joint Stock Company for the continuation of the works of Allan Kardec. He intended to bequeath the copyright of his spiritist writings and of the Review Spirit. But Allan Kardec was not destined to witness the realization of the project in which he took so deep an interest, and which has since been carried out with entire exactitude by his widow. On the 31st of March 1869, having just finished drawing up the constitution and rules of the society that was to take the place from which he foresaw that he would soon be removed, he was seated in his usual chair at his study table, in his rooms in the Rue Sainte-Anne, in the act of tying up a bundle of papers, when his busy life was suddenly brought to an end by the rupture of the aneurysm from which he had so long suffered. His passage from the earth to the spirit world, with which he had so closely identified himself, was instantaneous, painless, without a sigh or a tremor, a most peaceful falling asleep and reawaking fit ending of such a life. His remains were interred in the cemetery of Montmartre, in presence of a great concourse of friends, many hundreds of whom assemble there every year, on the anniversary of his decease, when a few commemorative words are spoken, and fresh flowers and wreaths, as is usual in continental graveyards, are laid upon his tomb. It is impossible to ascertain with any exactness the number of those who have adopted the views set forth by Allan Kardec, estimated by themselves at many millions. They are incontestably very numerous. The periodicals devoted to the advocacy of these views in various countries already number over 40, and new ones are constantly appearing. The death of Allan Kardec has not slackened the acceptance of the views set forth by him, and which are believed by those who hold them to be the basis, but the basis only, of the new development of religious truth predicted by Christ, the beginning of the promised revelation of many things that have been kept hidden since the foundation of the world, and for the knowledge of which the human race was not ready at the time of that prediction.